This is my family crest. Steve Brown made this for us, and I'm so proud of it. So I'm Cochiti, Raven Cochiti, and from the Stikeen Kwan in Wrangell. And you can see this has the raven at the top and then the frog. And I'm going to start by talking about life. Since time immemorial, the world as we know it has been made up of these huge, complex, interrelated ecosystems. And so everything that's alive has given birth, fed, migrated, died, become food for others, in sync with the world's rhythms. And because of climate change, that's changing. So I'm going to get a little grim for a little while, but then I'm going to end on a note of hope, okay? First of all, the changes that are coming are of a magnitude that's hard to even fathom. The polar ice cap, the top of the planet, the North Pole, the Arctic Ocean, has been covered by ice for, people guess somewhere between 10 and a couple of 100 million years. Try to imagine the minimum 10 million years. And this shows you how much ice there was in historic times, how much there was in 1985, and then what they're projecting to be happening, what we have coming. And the thing about this ice is that it, I don't want to say we're the center of the universe, but we kind of are in this, us Arctic people and subarctic people, in the sense that climate all over the planet is sort of governed by what's going on at the North and South Poles. And the way it works is the ice, let me move down here. It creates a high pressure zone that holds the warmer climates down towards the equator. Does everybody know all this kind of stuff? Because actually, let's go over it anyway. Okay, so it keeps the warm, moist air in the tropics, and it keeps and it sends cold, icy cold water into the oceans as it melts. And those ocean currents, that cold water interacts with warmer water, and it creates the currents, which also dictate weather. So, for instance, if you live in southeast Alaska, we're warmed by the Japanese current. If you go over the mountains, if you go up the Taku River or up the Stikeen River to Telegraph Creek or Atlin, it's 20 to 30 degrees on average here in January. In those communities, on the other side of the coastal mountains, it stays between 0 and 14 in the winter. So that Japanese current brings a lot of warm, moist air to our part of the state. Now try to imagine, and this is what's happening around the world, try to imagine if it just didn't show up one year, and all of a sudden we were experiencing the kind of weather that happens in the interior. And you'll see the equivalent of this, snow. And I forget where this is from, but in places like Miami, they're getting snow. And the reason is because without that high pressure zone at the top keeping the warm weather down here, those broad bands of climate are fluctuating. And so cold air is traveling down to more southern areas, and cold air is sometimes, and warm air is sometimes coming farther north than it has for eons. And we saw a bit of that last summer. I don't know how many of you live in Anchorage. I've been there, either living or visiting, and that kind of thing since the mid-70s. And for the first, 15 years I lived in Anchorage. You couldn't sunbathe outside in the summertime. I mean, I remember because I used to want to get a tan, and I remember situating myself with white walls on three sides of me and the sun, so that heat was reflecting off those walls, and I was trying to stay warm, lying there on my towel, trying to get a tan. And it was like that all the time. On the warmest of days, you couldn't sunbathe outside. Last summer, we had wildfires all over, and smoke from the Swan Lake fire on the Kenai Peninsula was drifting into Anchorage, and you couldn't open your windows because, your eyes were burning, your throat would hurt, you would start, if you took a deep breath, it hurt in your chest. You could definitely feel the smoke, affecting your systems. And it was 90 degrees. For the first time ever in recorded history in Anchorage, it was 90 degrees. And it's not like we crept up to 89. Our next highest high was 85. So we went from 85 to 90 as a record high. And I have a picture somewhere of somebody posted on Facebook. All the stores ran out of fans, and there was a picture going around on Facebook of people lined up at Costco when they got a new and the line was like a block long. Hundreds of people, when they found out Costco had gotten in a shipment of fans, they all went to the store to get one. So the other thing that's happening as the planet warms, the ocean is getting warmer, and that's fueling more hurricanes and stronger hurricanes. And if you've looked at hurricane pictures over the years, a lot of times what you'll see are homes that have, the roof torn off, but you'll see houses. Well, look at this. Bermuda was reduced to kindling and firewood by a Category 5 hurricane that sat over the islands for days. How did I get here? I'm sorry, my slides. Yeah. Well, let me jump to this topic. Yeah. So this is a whole different section. Okay, let me go back to ice. Then I'll go back to that. I'm going to talk about food after a bit, and I'll go back to those slides. So in Alaska, we had coastal ice that extended down, and if you look at a map, you can see the Pribilofs that are about midway across Alaska. And ice used to extend down and cover the Bering, Chukchi seas, and it went on nobody could go fishing up north past the Pribilofs for much of the year. And if you lived in the coastal communities, the ice was 10 or 12 feet thick, and it extended 20 miles out into the ocean. And under that ice were seals and walrus and other marine mammals, which would create breathing holes. And so men would go out on their snow machines, and they would get near a breathing hole, and they could hunt for seals and walrus that way. And then there would be open leads where migrating whales went through. And so you could see where the whales were going to show up, because that's the area that was open and where they could continue to breathe. Now that the sea ice is disappearing, it's hampering people's efforts to hunt, which is a really big deal if your other alternative is to get in a small boat. You're not going to take for one thing, you can't carry that much gas. And gasoline is $7 a gallon in a lot of these villages. So it's very difficult to get out to where the animals are. It's really hard on the animals because seals and walrus give birth on ice floes, and they stay there to be safe from polar bears. And the mothers go and feed and then come back and rest on the ice floes. And the walrus do the same thing. So now that they don't have the ice floes, and there have been, news stories about polar bears that had a cub and took off swimming north to get on the ice where they would be hunting seals too, and they couldn't find any. And the mother came back gaunt without the cub because she swam and swam and swam and couldn't find ice to pull up on and rest and hunt. And the walrus sometimes have to where they might be on an ice floe and swim for a mile every day to get from where they're feeding. They might, then swim a mile to get on an ice floe. Now they're having to swim sometimes 20, 40, 100 miles to get on a beach. And what happens on the beaches is they're very easily frightened and stampeded. And so those big bull walrus, which weigh over a ton, will crush calves. And then, so the other thing that's happening with the ice melting, is that the overall water temperature is rising. And so that's allowing toxic blooms and algae and those kinds of things to proliferate. And there have been enormous die-offs. And so this is one that happened out in the Aleutians. And then there have been die-offs of birds. And the next thing I wanted to mention is permafrost. That's ground that's been frozen anywhere from 2 years to thousands of years. I remember my brother-in-law used to work as a carpenter up in Barrow, Ukuluk, and he was telling me how they built houses, and they would drill into the ground, put the foundation house post, stand it up in the hole, and pour water around it. And it froze. And that was your house, that was your foundation, ice. And it was reliable enough. I mean, that was just the standard operating procedure, and it was reliable enough that people could do that, and that's how they built structures there. And then they put them up on stilts so that the heat from the house wouldn't melt the permafrost. So the permafrost also lies under lakes, like this one on the left, and it acts like a bowl and keeps the water from seeping out. So I interviewed Paul, or what's his name, Merkulieff? Larry Merkulieff from St. Paul, and he was telling me that one of the things he told me was that as early as the 1980s, elders on the Pribilofs were talking about the changes that they were seeing, where the fur seal, which had been harvested by the Japanese and the Russians and Americans since the early 1900s, their population was dwindling, and the elders were saying, we're seeing seals with a much less body fat than we used to. And nobody knew what the problem was, but the numbers went down far enough that eventually they gave up the commercial harvest. And still, the number of fur seals has dropped to 40% of what it was, 20, 30 years ago. How many of you have been to the Pribilofs? So you might remember, it's an incredible sight, or it was, to see these thousands of fur seals on the beaches. And as you can imagine, they're great swimmers, and they go surfing. It's just a beautiful, beautiful sight. So what Larry was telling me, though, was that as he flies out over Alaska, he sees dry lake beds, and he said it's like looking down at bathtub rings, because you can see where the water was and then where it was later and then where it was until finally there's no water. As you can imagine, this is disastrous for migratory species. This is where, this is on the Selawik River, where permafrost melted and the riverbank and a hillside collapsed, dropping tons of sediment into the Selawik River. And that kills salmon. They can't swim, and get oxygen through their gills and that kind of thing in water that has so much dirt in it. And then this is a house north of Fairbanks. And I remember going to Fairbanks at some point, and I was staying in a lodge, and the lodge owner was showing me where they had adjusted the floor so that as one of their main house posts sank, they could adjust the floor to, it's like as this main beam sank, they could adjust the floor so that they could put it wherever the beam was, because the beam was sinking. So you can imagine if you're a homeowner and this is what happens, there's no insurance for losing your home to melted permafrost. This is Alakanuk, and I'm not sure why the text is out of whack like that. But anyway, back here in the back, you can see that equipment, and over on the right. What happened here is their barge landing and a cannery were washed away, and so they're rebuilding the barge landing. This is a picture from Alakanuk, and it shows, you can hardly see it, but those are water and sewer pipes. And I talked with the city manager, and he was doing everything he could. He said, I call agency after agency after agency. They don't even return my calls because it's not they don't have the money, and it's not their responsibility to save us. And he said his greatest fear was that they would lose their running water and flush toilets, and teachers would start leaving. And then the school would be in jeopardy. So the other thing that's happening, and I think we all know about this, is, for instance, in Anchorage, the spruce bark beetle, the numbers were kept down by the cold winters. And now that the winters aren't as cold, they're proliferating and they're killing spruce trees. And they've killed something like 2.5 million acres of trees in south central Alaska. And just about that same amount of forest burned this last year, just as by coincidence. So what happens is the trees die, you have all this standing dead wood, and then you have a hot, dry summer, and the other trees, the trees that are alive, and the brush all get dried out. And then you get these wildfires, and they're incredibly hot. And so whereas they might have been a little bit more contained in the past, now they really are wildfires. The Swan Lake fire down by Kenai is still burning. It's been burning for months. They haven't been able, I remember, when they were saying things like, we have 600 firefighters on the Swan Lake fire. They were bringing in firefighters from Idaho and California and everywhere, and they were throwing everything at it. And they beat it back, to like 40%, but they weren't able to put it out. And there are actually fires that get underground and start burning peat, and you can't get them out. No matter what you do, there's just no way. And so those are burning. I remember a story by a reporter up by Fairbanks who talked about a fire that had been burning for years. So some of the villages So the other thing about rising temperatures is that the snow melts really quickly on the mountainside, and it just comes roaring down. And so you've heard about breakup, where you have a river that's 15 feet deep. You can drive a car on it. It's very thick ice, and it starts to break up. Great big icebergs come down. Sometimes the icebergs take out houses on the side of the river. What's happening now is that it's all happening so quickly that you're getting, the water can't get past the ice, and so it floods upriver, and you're getting village after village after village that is experiencing catastrophic flooding. And the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the Inspector General's office have done reports on this, and they've identified 36 villages that are in danger of being wiped out by catastrophic flooding. So, and some of that is due to the sea ice melting. So you look at Shishmaref and Kivalina and some of the villages out in western Alaska, and when they had that shelf of ice out there, that protected them from these incredible storms that would come ashore. Now they don't have that protection. The ice is gone. And so they're just getting hammered. And they lose, some have lost like 70. I had a quote in my notes for this about a woman who said, we lost 75 feet of coastline in one day. And if you go to these villages, you can see where houses have fallen into the water, and you can see houses that are right on the edge. And, we all read about this stuff in the newspaper, and we go, oh, gosh, that's terrible. But then you visit a village, and you're just like, oh, my God, tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars have been invested in these communities. And, and these people live there. So these are some of the resources that are at risk of disappearing. This is a fish processing plant in Soldotna. It's not at risk, but facilities like this one are at risk. This is a manufacturing plant in Emonic, and this did flood. I love that boat. Look at that boat. Can you imagine? I'd love to have a boat like that, except maybe with a little cabin on it. And a head. No. And then water and sewage treatment plants. They cost, villages. So I go to these, I was doing a series of stories on rural sanitation. And I used to work for the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium. And I'd talk to the engineers, and they would tell me every village has a potable water source. And it's oftentimes a laundromat where you can go and buy water. And I thought, oh, great, And then I went out there, and one of the people I interviewed was at the Yukon-Kuskokwim Health Corporation. And he said, my parents have to haul water. And I was like, and he said, it's really hard, because they're old. And I said, well, what about the laundromat? And he said, it's 22 cents a gallon. Okay, you and I, the average American, uses 100 gallons of water a day. I can't even do the math, at 22 cents a gallon. I should be able to do that math. But anyway, if you were in a refugee camp, they would allocate 15 gallons a day for you. In these villages that don't have running water, they're using on average 2 gallons of water a day per person. So when you get a water plant like this one in Ukuluk, it's cause for celebration. You'll interview somebody, and they'll tell you they're dreaming of the day when they can take a shower at home. This is the water tank at Ukuluk. This is so I didn't take a picture of the city office here in Marshall. It was a really old, battered, rundown building, but I mean, it's got a floor, it's got doors, it's got lights, it's got tables and chairs. All kinds of community events are there. And it's a resource. I mean, you take a village where people don't make a lot of money, and for them to pull together the money and the resources to build a city hall is a big deal. And then homes are put at risk. And something you'll see along rivers a lot of times is people have their house set off a little bit from the riverbank, and right on the riverbank they have their smokehouse and sheds where they store stuff. So, you want to live on the river so you can get your boat in and out pretty easily. And then you have all your fishing gear right there near the river. And those are the kinds of things that get washed away. Oh, and then let me go back to that food, those food slides. So this is the produce section in a village store. And I forget what village it was. There are apples to the right of that. I don't know why I took this picture so off kilter. Hi. Artsy. And this is the checkout. This is the exterior of a store. That sign says no out-of-town checks accepted. That's the only clue I had that it was a store. And this is the interior of the store. Those are actually different stores. Okay, now I'm going to go back to where I was. So that's all the bad stuff. That's all the bad news. Oh, and the reason I wanted to show you the pictures of the store was to mention how important it is that people be able to hunt and fish. People in urban areas, I think, eat maybe 25 pounds a year of wild fish and game. In a village, it's on average, 375 pounds per year. So moose, caribou, salmon. I'm trying to think of this delicious fish I just had not too long ago. Anyway, there are big fish that live in rivers up north, species that we don't harvest down here, berries, all kinds of food that people harvest from nature. And you can't live in your village if you have to buy even if you're a teacher and you have a steady salary, you can't afford to get all your food from the store, because by the time they pay for the cost of shipping everything out of Anchorage or Fairbanks, the cost is just prohibitive. So it's not all bad, though. There are also opportunities. And one of them is that with the ice gone, I don't know if you can make sense of this. It's like a puzzle, where you have to tilt your head and look around and kind of go, okay, where's Alaska? But if you look at the red, that shows you how you would traditionally get product from Russia to Asia. And the blue line shows what's coming, and that is increasingly ships go across the top of Russia, and they can get from the manufacturing and production centers in Western Russia and then get it over to China. And they're saving about 40 to 60% of they're cutting the distance by 40 to 60%. And likewise, they're cutting the fuel costs by that much. So I interviewed a guy from Nana, and they export zinc and other ores. And he said this is a game changer. Nana actually is, I think, they might be the biggest exporter in Alaska, and they export about 25% of the value of exports from Alaska. And when you think about how much fish we ship out and how much oil, that's a lot of zinc. And they're shipping it out to places all over the world. And he said, this is going to change everything. Nana is the native for-profit regional corporation in Northwest Alaska. And NANA, the name comes from the Northwest Alaska Native Association, which was the fraternal nonprofit organization that lobbied for ANCSA on behalf of the people in that part of the state. So now there was just an exhibit at the Anchorage Museum up in Anchorage about the Franklin expedition. And if you go back and read the stories of explorers, you'll find that, I don't know, I mean, what would be anybody's guess? How many years did they spend looking for a Northwest Passage? Like at least 100 years. People were sailing up and down, up and down, up and down, because they wanted to find a route across or through Canada that would take them back to Europe. And it didn't exist, but now it does. And that's because the ice at the top of the planet is melting. So I went, Alice Rogoff, who was the publisher of Alaska Dispatch News, used to organize a conference that was held in Girdwood, and it was called Arctic Imperative. And now she does the same well, I don't know if she does it. I don't think she does it. But other people have taken it up, and they have a conference called the Arctic Circle, and it's held in Iceland. And I don't know if you know Alice Rogoff, but her husband is a multi-billionaire. He's the head of the Carlyle Group, which has $11 billion in assets. And her husband's roommate was Chris Matthews of MSNBC. And I'm trying to remember, she used to work for Time or Business Week or she was a reporter. And she's well connected. So I went to this Arctic Imperative Conference in Girdwood, and I have never in my life been in a more high-powered gathering. I mean, there was the president of Iceland. There was Jim Baker, the former Secretary of State. There were people like the vice president for Exxon for North America, and the vice president of all these various oil companies, shipping companies, everybody who wanted to make a buck from the Arctic opening up, basically. And, you know, she started off the whole thing by saying, we are not here to talk about climate change. We're not here to argue about whether it's happening, what's causing it, how bad it's going to get, when it's going to happen. We're here to talk about the opportunities it presents. You know, which is, and true to form, there was not a single wildlife biologist at this conference. But if you wanted to talk oil and gas, I mean, there were people there. Admirals, generals, all kinds of high-powered people. And one of them was, his last name was Tashuti, and he owns a shipping company that operates in the North Atlantic and provides support to oil and gas development in the North Atlantic, and where there are enormous resources being developed. And he gave a presentation on this. And that company has been through this Northwest Passage, and they know exactly where the narrowest points are. They know the shallowest water. They know they've already been out there, and they've been looking at this, figuring out, okay, when, like right now, if we have, 5 months of winter, of sea ice, what are we going to do? We're going to be ready when it gets down to 6 weeks of sea ice. They're getting ready to, and so that raises the question of, okay, if people are coming up on the west coast of Alaska and going through the Bering Strait so they can go through the Arctic Ocean across the top of Canada to Europe, how ready are we? So this is a picture by the Canadian Coast Guard, and it shows a Coast Guard cutter following a icebreaker. So how many of you know how many icebreakers the United States has? One. We had 2. They're both really old, and the second one is now being used for parts for the first one. Guess how many icebreakers Russia has? 1933. And Russia has put nuclear-powered engines in them, in some of them, so that those icebreakers never have to come back to shore. They can just be out there, And I mean, I'm trying to remember what ship it was, but there was a ship that got stuck in the Arctic, and we had to call on Russia. I think it was when Shell Oil had the Ukuluk. It got stranded in the Arctic, and we had to call on Russia. Could you send over an icebreaker? I mean, I don't want to say I don't want to say pathetic, but I guess I just did. And so this is a Canadian icebreaker over in Canada in Baffin Bay. And one of the issues that we have for all this anticipated traffic up through the Bering Strait is the lack of navigational aids. The navigational aids, how many of you are boat faring? How many of you go boating? Okay, so how often do you refer to a map, a chart? How often, when you're out there, do you look up on your chart how deep the water is? I mean, how embarrassing is it to run aground? I saw somebody run aground in Gastineau Channel, and they weren't hurt, but I thought, oh, that's so embarrassing because everybody driving by can see your boat, and it's like, how many people are going to give you a hard time about that? Just teasing. But it's not funny to run aground out in the Bering Strait, because the nearest Coast Guard port is down in Kodiak, which is, 2,000 miles south? And if you're in an emergency, I mean, really, do you want to wait for the Coast Guard cutter? And there's not a lot of traffic. And, in these tiny villages, I mean, Barrow, Utqiagvik, thanks to Blair's father, Fred Paul, has a lot of money, and they have helicopters and they have big boats that they can take out on search and rescue operations. But you go down the coast of Western Alaska, and really, I think the next place where you can find a well-equipped search and rescue operation is Kodiak. And so there's no navigational or very poor navigational aids and no rescue. I interviewed a woman who was talking about she saw a raft with Russian lettering on it come ashore, a deflated raft, and it totally freaked her out because she thought, what if there are some people out there? And, nobody called her. She never did find out what happened. There's no big communications plan. And, I've worked in places like that. I was at a radio station, and when we had a small earthquake and all the CDs fell off the shelves, it happened over the weekend. And one by one, different people on the staff came in and went, oh my God, thousands of CDs are on the floor. They were all arranged by genre and alphabetical. What are the volunteers going to do? The one guy who knew the phone numbers of all the volunteers was traveling. And so that meant all the volunteers came in one by one and went, damn, now what? And, so after that happened, we said, okay, we've got to do a little bit better than this so that at least staff gets notified when something happens. And then when we had the earthquake in, anybody else who was in Anchorage for the 7.2 quake? Okay. Were you scared? Yeah. It was the most terrifying, if not the most, it was one of the most terrifying experiences in my life. And I used to work, as I mentioned, for a tribal health organization. I used to write articles about emergency preparedness. And so my husband and I had tacked shelves and bookcases to the, with straps to the wall. And just as you're decorating and futzing around in the house, I took the, the big geode, heavy, and I put that higher up because I thought, well, if that falls off, it's not likely to break. and I put the ceramic vases and crystal little things down in the lower shelves. And it actually worked. We only lost a few pieces of glass and crystal. But it was a mess, and it took us months. I mean, the things that weren't strapped to the wall fell over. And, I mean, we were in bed when it happened, and we woke up and we were like, we've got to get outside. We didn't realize that actually you should stay inside during a quake, because one of the most dangerous places is the facade of the building, because that's just tacked on, and that's where things are going to fall. And most injuries are from things that fall down or fly through the air and hit you. So if you're in bed, pull the covers over your head. And if you're somewhere else, if you're near a table, get under the table or get in a doorway. But you want to protect yourself from flying debris. Anyway, we were both, okay, we got to get up, get our coats on, get our boots on, hurry up. We got to get out of here. And then we stepped out of the bedroom into the hallway, and our way was completely blocked by tipped over bookcases. And there was, we had to stop. Here we are with this sense of urgency, and we had to stop and pick up all the books. And then we were there were after quakes. Anyway, I'm getting a little off topic, but there were after quakes, and so we didn't put books back on the shelves for weeks, because we thought, well, there's just going to be another quake. It's going to knock everything down, so why do this twice? So back to climate change. This is a data gathering buoy. It was put out by Woods Hole, which is a prestigious East Coast research institute. They're doing stuff like this. The U.S. Coast Guard doesn't have enough money. I mean, if you ever tune in to C-SPAN, you can find the schedule and find out when the Coast Guard is testifying. I mean, it's sad. It's sad to listen to admirals begging for money and talking, and I've interviewed them after, in situations, and they said, I lie awake at night, I can't sleep thinking about the disasters that can happen, with these people who don't know what they're doing going through the Bering Strait. And I don't remember when this happened, but does anybody else remember when a cruise ship went to Barrow from Denmark? So everybody do you remember? And the officials, they had no way to handle passports or, people. Afterwards, everybody was going, well, if somebody had jumped ship, I don't know what we would have done. But I went to Wales one time, which is the village closest to Little Diomede, which is the point in Alaska that's closest to Big Diomede, which is the point in Russia that is closest to Alaska. And I was interviewing somebody there, and he said, oh, we've got another wacko here who wants to walk to Russia. There are people who have, it's like their life mission, to go to Wales and figure out how to get across the Bering Strait over to Russia. And the village has to figure out how to deal with them. And basically what they do is try to talk them out of it and get them out of town. But you also have kayakers and sailors, people in small boats, people in yachts, all kinds of people who are now making this trek. Oh, what are you doing? No, you're probably a good sailor, right? What are you doing?
What am I doing?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of this.
I've sailed before. It was kind of my first career. I was working in the commercial marine industry and shipping.
Have you gone up there?
I haven't been that far north, no.
Okay, so we have a mariner here. He hasn't tried to go through the Bering Straits, but you've been tempted probably? Yeah. So the other thing that people talk about, or did talk about, and I'm sure still are, is the wealth that is under the Arctic Ocean and the Chukchi Sea. And Shell Oil wanted to tap into that. and I think they spent something like $5 or $6 billion, and they put a drilling rig up there, and I mean it was hard. They ran into permitting difficulties. There was a lot of resistance from the state and from locals who basically said, you're not ready to operate in the Arctic. And does anybody want to say how that ended? Okay, so their drilling rig, does anybody know, is this the rig itself, or what is this? Yeah, this is the Ukuluk. And Shell called it quits. They tried to drill, and it was the window of time when they could get a drill rig in and send a rig down underground, under the bottom of the ocean. The window of time was too short, and they didn't actually reach oil. And they spent years working on this, and they finally decided to pull the plug. And they took the Ukuluk, and they were leaving Alaska, and they had 2 tugboats strapped to the Ukuluk, and the lines broke. And the Ukuluk is, it's not self-propelled, and it ran aground. And everybody was just, what if the Ukuluk had been drilling, and we saw what happened in the Gulf of Mexico when systems failed and oil was just spewing into the Gulf of Mexico. If that happened in the Arctic, it would travel throughout the Arctic Ocean there's no limit. If you saw the Exxon Valdez oil spill, oil from the Exxon Valdez oil spill made its way down the Alaska Peninsula to Kodiak and beyond. Oil travels. And so if there were oil spilled in the Bering Strait and it went north, it's a big world out there. And so people were kind of going, okay, this is exactly what we were afraid would happen, and it happened. So can you learn from this? And nobody has tried to go back there. But that doesn't mean people aren't dreaming of the day when they can drill for oil. They think that it's like 2 Saudi Arabias up there, and there's incredible wealth for somebody who can tap into it. So Alaskans, and you'll see this in news articles where people are so excited. It's like, oh, we're going to have oil and gas. We're going to have another boom. We're going to be rich again. Please make it happen. Let it happen. It was so nice when we had so much money coming in. And the thing is that the oil that's left, most of it is on federal land. The state doesn't collect royalties on oil development on federal land, and it doesn't collect revenues from oil development in the outer continental shelf. And so what we would get are people who work in the oil fields would get jobs, but how many of you ever see them in your town? How many oil workers do you know they live in your neighborhood? Because what they do is they fly down to Seattle. That's where they live. They live on an island in Puget Sound. They leave the North Slope. They fly down to, it's okay, Ben, you don't have to feel bad. They're from that part of the country. So they leave the North Slope, they leave Prudhoe Bay, they fly to Fairbanks, they fly through Seattle. I've seen them at the airport, in Arizona. They're dressed like oil workers, they're wearing Carhartts and everything, but they have this air about them of being experienced travelers. You can just read the body language. Every 3 weeks, they leave Alaska. They fly to and from work, out of state. So, and we don't have an income tax, so we don't get any revenues. And the multiplier effect of them spending their wages in Alaska, we wouldn't get that. Okay, so this is a port in Russia. We don't have any safe harbors or ports north of Kodiak. And this is one of 13 Russian ports, and they're pouring huge amounts of money into that. And the other thing that Russia is doing is they've gone before the Arctic Council, and they're claiming the outer continental shelf, which is 200 miles offshore, north to the North Pole. They're saying Russia owns rights to the North Pole. Well, there are, I think, 7 or 8 Arctic nations. Canada is claiming ownership or economic development rights north to the north, from their northern border north to the North Pole. So is Denmark and Sweden and Finland. All the other Arctic nations have been filing claims with the Arctic Council, which is the forum where this will be decided, and saying their outer continental shelf goes to the North Pole. We're not, because we go to the Arctic Council meetings, but the treaty that governs all of this, the law of the sea, the United States has not signed. And so we have no grounds. I mean, we can go and say, well, we have rights, this is what we think we own. And everybody just goes, yeah, right, go away, And something that is happening is the military is expanding its activities. So,
carriers are our new icebreakers.
yeah. So I didn't realize I was running over. I started late, so I'm going to talk faster now. So one of the things that we're survivors. Alaska Natives are survivors, and one of the reasons that we are still here is because of our cultural values. And one of them is, there's this little word subsistence that people use. And, I've met non-natives who call themselves subsistence users, and people think of it as living off the land, but in the native traditions, it's much, much more. It's part of a system where you share everything, food that you've harvested from nature with everybody else. And it's, your family, your extended family. Cindy, somebody asked me one time, what's extended family? And I said, extended family is where your cousin's ex-husband's niece calls you up and asks if she's in a fix, and she calls you up and asks if you can help. And you go, yeah. And, my husband doesn't even know all his cousins, much less the niece of an ex-husband of a relative. But anyway, so the ties between among relatives and your clan and your community extend, and there's a cultural value placed on helping each other out and thinking of the group. I mean, I was walking with Phyllis Carlson one time, who lives here in Juneau, and her daughter was, maybe 10 at the time or something, and we were walking on the shore, and her daughter was wading in the water, and Phyllis said, well, don't get wet. And she was like, yeah. Well, she got water in her boots, and Phyllis said, it's not just, I didn't say that just because I want you to be comfortable. You have to think about the impact of your actions on all of us. If we were in a camping situation and you got your feet wet and we had to stop to, so you could change your socks and warm up if you got hypothermic, that could keep all of us from seeking shelter if that's what we were trying to do. So you have to take care of yourself to help take care of the group. And I thought, God, that is how natives think. So anyway, that kind of thinking and those cultural values, that a good person is a generous person, that's part of what has made us who we are. So now we have to think about, we have that as one of our strengths. Another one is we know how to deal with extreme weather. I mean, I went to Barrow one time in the winter. Cindy worked up there for two winters. And you know what? I was walking from Browerville into Barrow which it's only a mile, but it was 60 below. And I was too cheap to pay $5 for a cab. And I was walking back and forth every day until somebody said, you know, polar bears love that lagoon and they're constantly traveling up and down it, so don't do that. And I went, oh, okay, that's the end of that. But what we need to do is find out more about the risks. Like, what is your community vulnerable to? I mean, everybody in Anchorage, we get earthquakes often enough. We knew that we could see another big one. Villages who on the Yukon know that there may be flooding. Do some thinking and planning, and and then, you know, figure out ways to mitigate the potential risk and to prevent and to respond. And a group of Alaskans met. I think it's called Adapt Alaska. And, well, here's an adaptation. The ice used to be so thick nobody worried about it. Here's a guy who uses a drone to fly over the ice and see how thick it is to decide whether it's safe enough for him to go out on in a snow machine. This is just a list of some of the agencies. And Robin Bronin is a human rights attorney in Anchorage, and she actually went back to school and did her dissertation on climate change. And she said, you know, Alaska's the worst. I mean, we're so unprepared. And she used some of these villages as a case in point. These are the agencies Newtalk is working with. Oops. And here are the other agencies Newtalk's working with. Remember that guy I mentioned who has water and sewer pipes that are disappearing and he can't get anybody to even call him back? I mean, try to imagine if your village is on the verge of being washed away. It's on one of these endangered lists, and these are the people you need to contact. And none of them have it as their mandate to help you. So the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, for instance, can come in and put up, you know, a barrier against erosion, but they can't put they can put money, $45 million, say, into protecting you against further erosion. They can't put any money into relocating the village. So Robin Bronin talks about the, you know, and these are based on laws that go back centuries. The Army Corps of Engineers was, you know, created very early in our nation's history. And it's kind of enshrined and encased in all these laws and regulations that have built up over time. And she said, we've got to change this. So I've just thrown out a bunch of, these are places where you can go to help. ANTHC has a Center for Climate and Health. They do health assessments. These are communities that have had health assessments. EPA gives out IGAP grants. You can hire somebody. These are things we can do. Educate yourself. Figure out, you know, get food, get technical assistance. If everything's about to get washed away, replace it with something portable. Let's see. And one of the things that Robin Bronin emphasizes is self-determination. And that is, don't tell villagers they have to move and where they're going to move to. Let them decide so Kivalina, for instance, said the first thing we want to do is figure out where we're going to evacuate to. And they're building a road to a school off the barrier reef or barrier island that they're on. Because the way it is right now, you have to get across a lagoon. The Red Dog Mine sends a bus. You get on the bus. Actually, you take a snow machine and you go a ways down the road, and then you can get to, across the tundra, and then you get to where there's a road. You get on a bus that Red Dog Mine sends out, and then they can take you to their camp. There's a blizzard. Your village is being destroyed. You're old, infirm, or you have a newborn baby, and this is what you're going to do? So they're building a road to a new place. So, oh gosh, my husband was executive producer of the film Spirit of the Wind. And I went to Tuntatuliak, and this is part of the family that we stayed with. And after dinner, they put a video on, and it was Spirit of the Wind. And I said, oh my gosh, that's so cool. And it turns out it's one of their favorite videos. And if you've seen the film, George Atla, the world champion dog musher, is in it. That little baby, every time George Atla started to talk, it turned around to look at him, watch him, hear what he had to say. He just loved and admired George Atla. So here we are watching that. But see, on the right is somebody else in a different village actually wanted to have hot water, so he created his own water heater. And then beneath that is a kitchen that doesn't happen to have running water. So I just want to put that in there to show you that we're resilient, we're tough, we can do this, but we have to work at it because nobody's going to save us. That's it for me. Thanks so much.